Hey everybody, it is Saturday night and we're going to take another trip around the world. So we're going to start here as usual with my 29-gallon miscellaneous. I just got in there and did a pretty significant water change, maybe about a 30 to 40%, somewhere in there. And I checked the nitrates while I was in there just for, the heck of it, to see what they were. And the vial turned really red, which is not unusual. This is probably my most neglected tank down here anyway. I've got a couple upstairs that I don't pay a whole lot of attention to either. And there's no real point to that. I'm just kind of, I always throw that out there, that this is sort of my oldest tank. It just kind of ticks over. I never really have to worry about anything. I did add a pleco in here recently, if you want to call it a pleco, a little rubber lip. And I didn't do anything to the tank as far as trying to get it cleaned up, but you can see how I've got some patches of the brown diatom algae, and this one's right here on the front glass, and there's not a lot left of it. You can see where it's got those really sharp edges. That's where the fish has cleaned up to. You can even see some patches on the leaves down there where it's cleaned. Now, the one thing that's kind of concerned me, I apologize for the glare. Hang on here half a second. This rock right here has been the perch of that rubber lip for a long time. There he is. I've been looking around for him. And the one I had in here, I had for about 5 years before it died. And the week or two before it died, it actually started laying on that rock and just not moving. And it just, I don't know what was going on with it, but it always just bothers me when I see that one lying on that same rock. I'm sure there's no, connection or anything, but just mentally I make that connection and it bothers me. So there's another little shoot of Anubias popping up now that I'm looking in there. And you can also see on this little faux piece of rock right there, it's one of those ceramic cichlid caves. You can see how sharp and clean those lines are where the fish has been on there keeping that clean. So as usual, I swear by the rubber lips. I think they're fantastic tank cleaners. You can even see the woodwork in there, how nice and crisp and clean that looks. You can actually see all the wood grain and texture, and that is all from that one single little rubber lip in there. I also lost my couple of drawing a blank here. We're looking right at them. Skirt tetras, glowfish. There we go. I had 2 of them in here out of my original 5 that were looking really rough. And now that I'm looking in there, I only see 2 left. So I know 2 of them had died. So apparently maybe a third one of them have died because I'm only seeing those 2. So again, for genetically modified skirt tetras to live 5 years, I'm pretty impressed, especially when you consider that these are some of my original fish that have gone through all of my learning curve of my beginning days all the way up until now, and we've still got a couple of them with us. And even these little white cloud mountain minnows that are in here and a few of the neons are some of my original fish. So I don't know, I guess that's about it. I can't think of anything else that's going on in this tank. Oh yes, there is. There's one other thing, and that is the plants. I took several of the small floating water sprite out of this tank and I dropped them into this little crab tank here that I just turned the light out for a moment. So we'll get back to that at the end. Moving on now to my Grammie tank. Not really much going on in here as far as anything new and different. I added some neons in here recently. I think I put 9 of them in, and I still have, I can see 6 of them right now. So I think I lost the first 3 within the first day or 2, and it doesn't seem like I've lost any since then. So I do have a bunch of neons in my quarantine tank right now, and the $1 a fish sale for the neons and various live bears and a few different tetras and stuff like that over at the big chain store is still going on to the end of February. So I might get even more neons because I always wanted a really nice big school of neons in one of my tank, 20 neons, 25 neons swimming back and forth. So right now I've got 6 of them in here, and I don't think it's enough in this large of a tank with this much cover and this much space. I don't think it's enough for them to coalesce into a really good shoal or a tight shoal. And there's nothing in this tank that's really a threat to them, which also prevents them from really feeling a need to shoal tightly or school tightly, however you want to say that. So other than that, not a lot going on. Everybody's all round up because they think they're getting dinner here soon. And there is my, believe it or not, that's the small clown loach that was in this tank. And it's definitely come back out and is swimming around like normal, and everybody's all nice and happy again. So the movement of my clown loaches turned out for the best for everybody. So moving on to my TBar tank. Nothing really going on in this tank. We'll have a look at it for a few minutes. I'll see if anything catches my eye. We've got some new growth coming in on the Anubias there in the center. I've not seen any serious aggression between the angelfish, even though this one here, my green giant, has to be mature by now, at least sexually mature, enough that if there was going to be a lot of aggression, we'd be seeing it. But it's just that kind of aggression right there. A little bit of face off here, a little bit of chase them away there. Nothing real serious. You can see how long and elaborate the fins are. You can even see that little caudal filament sticking off the back. I don't know how well that's coming out on camera, but if you look really closely at the base, you know, the bottom edge of the caudal fin or the tail fin, you can see that little caudal filament coming off of there. So the fact that that's intact lets you know this fish is not taking much abuse at all from anybody. And likewise with this one, my crystal white angelfish, a little younger, a little smaller, but still big enough that we would be seeing issues. And these two went into the tank fairly young together, and they seem to still hang out together, and I'm really hoping I've got a pair. I think if the green giant and that crystal white actually started spawning, for once I might make the effort to actually separate those eggs out and try to actually get some, because I think that would make some really, really pretty babies. Thinking about adding a few more hatchet fish to this tank. I've got, I don't know, 4 of them in here, 5 of them in here, something like that. And once again, they don't really shoal. They just kind of swim around the tank. My experience is that the silver hatchets tend to be a little more free swimming down into the water column. I had some marble hatchet fish once, and you'd swear they were made out of cork. They never left the surface of the water. I mean, they didn't swim a 1/4 inch down into the water column, even when food was swirling around. The only time they ever moved away from the surface was if you were doing a water change or they were really freaked out over something. They would go low and hide. Otherwise, they floated like corks. These silver hatchet fish, however, actually do tend to swim around in the tank, and you do get to see them a little more. So maybe if I had enough of them that they shoaled together, I think that would look nice, having a nice little group of them in there. Really, really interesting looking fish. Some people hate them. You know, yeah, that's one you either kind of think they look weird and stupid, or you really like them, one or the other. I happen to like them. I think they're really cool looking. So my 2 little Siamese algae eaters are in here and still doing all fine and well and good, although they're getting a little nippy with each other, it looks like. I might have to get a couple more of them and get a little school of them in here too. So I think just the 2 of them might be not enough. You know, 1 would be fine, but 2 is probably just the wrong number. You probably need 4 or 5 or a singleton. 2 is probably not going to really work out. Again, one of the problems with a impulse purchase. So I can always get more. No biggie. That's not like that would hurt my feelings, having to put some more of those in the tank. My Black Ghost Knifefish tank. Not really a lot to talk about in here. I did a video recently. I'll attach a card, you know, at least to this playlist if you want to go back and look at the last few videos I've done. Nothing major. Did a water change recently. I've added a few rubber lips into this tank, and of course you can see how stunning and beautiful this one is. This one was also treated with the ChemiClean, and that finally, I know I go on and on about this, but I'm really, really just tickled pink with the results I've seen based on my experience over the years of fighting that cyanobacteria and fighting the growth that I had in this tank. That was always just something I had come to live with in this tank, and now it seems that I don't have to anymore thanks to that ChemiClean. That stuff is just amazing. And then once everything was killed and dead, the rubber lips got in there and they did their job. Again, I always go on about the rubber lips, but look at that tank. And if you go back a couple of months and you look at some of these older videos of this tank, or if you've followed along regularly, you will know what an enormous difference those fish have made in this tank. So not going to go on too much more about that. I'm just really happy with it. Love looking at this tank. It's one of my favorites. So moving on to my native tank. Nothing really going on in here. If you haven't been following along, I did add some plants recently. That's new. I've always said I never wanted plants in this tank, and I really don't. I kind of like it in here, and as time is going on, we've sort of drifted further and further away from this being a native tank. It still feels like a native tank, but it's kind of not really anymore. We've got the TBar, the tilapia's back in here, hiding in the corner back there. I have added a high-finned spotted pleco sold from one of the big chain pet stores. It's their store name for it. I can't remember. I had some viewers kindly tell me what fish it actually is, and I looked it up, and I'm pretty sure they're right. And I don't remember what it was. So if anybody wants to throw that comment back down below and tell me what those high-finned spotted plecos that Petco sells, whatever that is, I've got one of them in here, and it's already starting to make a difference, even with the Chinese algae eater that's still in here. Look at this, clean marks and stuff we're already starting to see. You can see fresh scrapes and scratches on the wood. You can tell they're all waiting for their dinner. Nobody's been fed yet today. I am happy to say that I've got a crayfish still alive and well in there. I did have one of my regular viewers thinking I was out of crayfish. We did find a dead crayfish in there yesterday, and I knew I had a few left, but I wasn't sure how many, and over the last week or two we found a few dead, and just doing the simple math, there should have amounted to no crayfish left. But I've always said I wasn't sure how many I had left, and now we're seeing one, and that was very much alive. I could see it in there, I could see its little mouth parts moving, and so it's doing fine. So we at least still have that one left, and then who knows, we'll maybe have some more. But we're more than halfway through February now, and that means not too long we'll be out catching some more in the great outdoors. Meanwhile, we've got the plants that I put in there have all been torn up for the most part. Some of the Java fern is still attached, but we'll see how long that lasts. I really do need to get in there, and I'm not too worried about the temple plant, but you can see this is a couple big chunks of Java fern have floated loose right there. And actually, that's really only about it. We got two. You can see this rhizome here and this rhizome here, and then all the rest of that is just that temple plant. So that's not too bad. We can get those two pieces of Java back, wedged in between some rocks or something a little more thoroughly, and maybe it'll attach and start growing, which I'm kind of digging the green look in there. I like the plants. I like planted tanks anyway, if you hadn't noticed. So this one was always an oddball for me, and now that it actually has some greenery in there, again, I'm kind of digging it. So I think my next step is going to be to actually try to float some water sprite in there too. I really love the way we're getting the dapple sunlight effect between the ripples in the water, the LEDs, and then the greenery. Giving that little green hue and dapple sunlight effect is just really, really good looking. So maybe this is going to evolve a little bit more into a planted tank, and we'll see how that goes. But moving on, because I can spend all day pretty much on any one of these tanks. We're not going to worry too much about what's going on in the former snail tank, I'm going to call it. I don't even think there's any snails in there anymore. I've just started ignoring that tank. It's probably got those little worms growing in there and killing everything. One of these days soon, I'm just going to strip it down and start it over. This tank, the only thing I can point out is that we've got another mark on the side of the gudgeon here. It's not bad, but it is worth noting. It is there. The plants are still getting lush and bushy and crazy in here, so I'm going to probably have to get in here and do some trimming up soon. It's definitely overdue time for a water change and getting in there and getting the gravel vacked up a little bit, or the sand I should say. And I really still do need to get in here and do a treatment of that ChemiClean. I still want to do it on this tank too, because I think it'll look amazing, and I do have a rubber lip in this tank who's already doing a really good job. But remember, nothing will eat that cyanobacteria. So if you've got the cyanobacteria growing all over stuff, like we can see here, you see how that's sort of thick and green and gross and all that. That's not stuff that rubber lip will ever eat. So having one of them in your tank is not going to clean that kind of stuff up. Now, if we treat that with the ChemiClean and kill it, and it'll turn into sort of like brown dead stuff on the plant. Look, we can see mark right there on its side too. So that's probably, again, from that loach. I'd kind of forgotten that was in there, to tell you the truth. But that red-tail loach has probably been making trouble again. So, but at any rate, if if you do that treatment, you get the stuff cleaned, and then you will be amazed at how fast that rubber lip will go around and start cleaning that up. So we'll do a video on that soon. Again, that treatment's coming up here in the near future. Moving on to my 125, I've almost got the room cleaned up enough that we can step back a little bit and get most of the tank without me knocking anything over. So that's just a little look at the whole thing, what's going on. And then we can come over and we can have a look maybe a little more closely at a few of the details. I've had quite a few people point out recently how big my loaches are there and how much they would be worth if I was to find them in a fish store. And I've seen loaches bigger than this on sale at one of my local fish stores. It's the one I don't go to very often. It's about an hour away, but it's not the one that we are all familiar with. It's the one that doesn't let me shoot video there. And I saw a couple in their tank that were bigger than this big one. Or I don't know, maybe it just looked bigger because it was in a smaller tank and just proportionately it looked bigger. But it was $59.99, I believe. And then I've seen them, like the size that we saw in my Grammie tank, I've seen them for about $30. And if you've ever wondered, it's because they're not really fast-growing fish. As big as these are still about 4 years old. And I'm really surprised that these bigger ones are 4 years old. And if you see my little one right here, this one, I'm not kidding, this one went into the tank the same time as this one. I bought them the same day from the same place. These both came from the big chain pet store, and that fish and that fish are the same age. And then this big one actually is the one that came out of my Grammie tank and left the other one behind. So there's a good look at them actually side by side together. Those two are actually the same age. It's hard to believe the difference in growth rate. So this loach here, that's a 4-year-old clown loach. They're slow growers for the most part. Again, I'm really shocked that these have gotten as big as they've gotten in just the few years I've had them. Typically when you see a 6 or 8 inch clown loach in someone's tank, it's a 10 or 12-year-old fish, and that's why they're so expensive. It's a lot of investment to grow a clown loach up to that kind of size. It's definitely not something that's come out of a mass production breeder's tank. That's something that somebody spent years and years caring for before you see it that size in a fish tank. So other than that, I got nothing really going on in this tank. I do want to try to put some more plants in there. And speaking of plants, I've noticed that we've got a little new fern growing in there. And since I don't have any real vigorous plant eaters, my Synodontis down there will nibble on the plants a little bit, but it's nothing too bad. So I might be able to separate that off and attach that somewhere else in the tank. It's not thriving, but it is still staying alive. And maybe if I actually plant it down in the substrate, this is a planted substrate, which will provide it with some micronutrients that it's not getting by being up in the water column, because this parent plant, mother plant if you will, is just tucked behind that rock and the roots are just free floating. They're not actually down in the substrate. So if I plant that and allow it to get some of the micronutrients out of the substrate, I think it'll do a little better. So we'll see. That'll be something to do in the future as well. And I'm also looking forward to getting some of that floating water sprite back in this tank. That'll be coming real soon. Alright, here's the fish that nobody has seen yet. Right there's one of the angelfish. This was a spur-of-the-moment purchase yesterday. I just saw it and it was so pretty that I brought it home. I know a lot of people are going to whine about me getting more angelfish, but it's my tanks, not yours, and I love angelfish. This is the first one I got, and we're not really getting a good look at it, but this one came from, there we go, this one came from the big chain pet store that I seldom buy fish from because I don't really care for their fish. I still am going to do that video about big chain pet stores and have a discussion about that. I almost got it done last night, but it never worked out. But when I was in there looking for some substrate, because that big chain fish store is where I go to buy stuff rather than fish, the other one is where I go to buy fish. And while I was in there, I just had a look around, and that's where I saw those lyre-tail cherry barbs, which we'll see in a minute. And this angelfish was just amazing looking, and I always say an angelfish really has to beg me to take it home for me to take it home. There's no such thing as an unattractive angelfish. So the idea of just bringing a pretty angelfish home, you know, you can't not do that. So I usually wait till I see something that really grabs my attention. And I wasn't looking for anything fancy or special. I wanted just a mixed angelfish or just a random angelfish. And that one just caught my eye. So I brought that home. My wife actually got excited about it, even though I intended it to be in this tank. And since she got excited about seeing the angelfish down here, when I saw this one really caught my eye too. This one is going to be fantastic. I'll even go so far as to say this one's going to be fabulous. It's going to have long flowing fins. It's going to be marbled color with those brilliant white pectoral fins. This is going to be a looker when it gets bigger, I'm sure. I've got an eye for angelfish, and again, it's just a mixed veil. It was $4.99, but this one's going to be stunning. So this one might actually wind up in my wife's tank upstairs eventually, but there you go. That's the first look at my two new angelfish. And if they get along and they don't fight, maybe they'll stay in this tank together, and I'll get another one for my wife's tank. Like I say, I'm a big fan of angelfish. I absolutely love them. I don't care how common they are. I know everybody has angelfish, but you know, sometimes there's a reason everybody has something, and in this case, angelfish are just amazing fish, and that's why everybody has them, because I'm not the only one that thinks so. There's a little better look at it. That is going to be a good looking angelfish when it gets older. So moving on to my quarantine tank, I have not lost a single neon in this tank, and there's one of the 4 coolie loaches. I'm trying the coolie loaches again. I didn't have luck with them before, but so far all 4 of them are still alive. In this quarantine tank, I can't say I'm really digging them, but I've got them, and once they're done with quarantine, they're going to go into my Grammie tank with all my other loaches, and we'll probably just never see them again. They'll bury themselves in the sand, and that'll be that. That's one of the lyre-tail cherry barbs. Once it gets into a less stressful situation and starts maturing, the colors will come in. It will look amazing. And right there, if you can see that little movement darting around, is the little tiny fish that I got for free. So we're going to wait and see what that turns out to be. And I actually brought this little guy home for free too. That is I can't even remember what it's called. But it was a little freebie. There's that little baby fish swimming around. I still don't know what it is yet, but I got that one accidentally for free. And then my big chain pet store, when they get live bearers in, they sometimes have extra babies, and they usually throw them in a side tank or something. And I picked that little guy out one day and came home with it. So I don't know where it's going to end up, but it's finally getting big enough to really get a look at what it looks like. So I'm quite happy with that. So that's my quarantine tank. And we will say almost last is my brackish tank with my figure 8 puffer butterbean. The only things of note in this tank is that the forward light fixture is burned out. One of the tubes is out, I'm assuming. I haven't actually dug into it yet, but I think one of the tubes is out, and that causes the entire fixture to go out. And that's why the tank is so dark right now. So that's on my list of things to get done tonight while this video is uploading. I'm going to be working on getting that light fixed. Excuse me. I also noted today that there are at least 5 shrimp still in the tank. There's another one right here on that rock. There was 2 of them right down there earlier, and one of them was definitely one of the new shrimp. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat from talking for so long. One of them was definitely the newer shrimp. That was one of the very small, whitish ones. So quite a few of them are still alive, and I think the 3 or 4 big ones that I put in there from my crab tank are still alive too. So moving on and wrapping this up, because we're getting quite long-winded here and my voice is getting really scratchy. This is my, at least temporary, redclawed crab tank, and tonight I just added a bunch of water to it. There wasn't actually enough water in there to do a water change. I would have had to take a turkey baster and draw little bits of water out at a time. So what I did was I added a bunch of water, And now I'll be able to scoop some of that water back out, and that'll sort of count as a partial water change. And I also note, if you see the greenery in there, I took some of the floating water Sprite out of the 29 miscellaneous right there and dropped it in, and that's why we've got some green in there. And the crabs like to eat the green stuff, and if it doesn't, you know, get eaten by the crabs, it'll grow and thrive in there under this new light. I did reduce the size of that little CFL in there, even though it still looks like this tank is overlit. But that's about as small a bulb as I can put in there, other than putting like a nightlight on it or something. So there you go. I'm going to wrap it up. We're back to where we started and all the way around the world, and tomorrow I'm probably not even going to be able to talk. So thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, this one is my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank. Thanks for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one.